How's it going, guys? Joe here. Welcome to this year's New Year's Goals Checkup, the place where I check what goals I accomplished in the last year, what I did not accomplish, and also a plan for what I'm going to accomplish in the next year. Well, this year. Let's just jump right in. The first goal I had was to make the Ultimate Utilities flash drive. So the idea is I was going to use a utility called Ventoy, which you can download from the internet, and essentially make my ultimate makeshift flash drive, which is a Samsung SSD converted to USB. And I was gonna have the first part be for bootable Ventoy images, then the middle part was gonna be for general storage since this is a terabyte large, and then the last bit was gonna be for booting operating systems. And to me, that was the ultimate way of using a flash drive. So I'm literally using it for all those things at the same time. So did I end up accomplishing that? Well, yes and no. Yes, because I did end up coming up with a solution for this, but no, because this is not how I'm actually using it. What I've decided is I'm just gonna use this 256 gigs SanDisk Extreme Pro. I put Ventoy on here, and I can store plenty of ISO images, and it gets like maybe 300 megabytes per second or so. So the boot speeds are really fast on this drive too. But now I use this as more of a storage drive most of the time, or also I have it in my Intel NUC as a secondary boot drive so I can test out different operating systems in home lab environments, which I'll go over in a little bit. So did I accomplish the Ultimate Utilities flash drive? I'm gonna say yes because I did come up with a solution to that. I used the SSD for the last two purposes, but this is a Ventoy drive, so it works with this. I also store utilities on here, not just bootable operating systems and stuff. My next goal was to make the full switch to QEMU. Did I end up accomplishing that one? I'm gonna say not really, because I do have a Linux operating system, which I will go over in a little bit, which is where I would be using QEMU. I do fully use QEMU when I'm inside of Linux running virtual machines, but on Mac and Windows, sometimes VirtualBox is just easier. I'm a believer in using the right tool for the right job, and QEMU may not always fit that bill depending on the situation. There's some situations where VirtualBox might actually end up being better, and others where QEMU could be better. So I'm going to say that I did not accomplish this goal, but I am using QEMU a lot more than I did when I made my last video, so it's kind of accomplished in a sense, but I'm not going to check that item. My next goal was to try out a bunch of Linux operating system environments on the host operating system so that I could explore it and see what kind of options there are. So did I accomplish that goal? Well, I tried a couple different operating systems like Debian. I've done a couple installs of those on the host operating system. I didn't quite explore as much as I wanted to with that, but I could technically say that I did that because I'm actually making a switch to Linux and I've already started that process. I'll have a video coming out with that soon, so check out for that. Otherwise, I'm going to check this item right here. Create my own Linux environment. The idea with this one is I was going to sort of create my own Linux environment from scratch using either Debian, Fedora, or Arch basis. Did I end up doing that? No. I did end up using a bit of Debian Titus, which is one that Chris Titus on YouTube ended up creating himself, but I didn't create one of my own. So no, that goal did not get accomplished. Learn server and Linux technologies. This one definitely did get accomplished. I did a bunch of home lab related stuff in the last year. I installed many different environments, whether it's Linux environments. I've also done some hard drive storage ones like TrueNAS. I got to experiment with that quite a bit. I've also tried bare metal hypervisors like XCP-ng, ESXi, Windows Server, Hyper-V. I tried Windows Server and stuff and got quite a bit of experience with that. I'm surprised to say. I didn't even think I'd be doing that, but I managed to accomplish that as well. I also messed around with PF and stuff like that too. So I definitely set a bunch of home lab environments up. I kind of did a Linux web server with Plex Media Server, but I didn't quite do what I originally had in mind. But otherwise, I would say I accomplished the overall gist of the goal. Get keyboard shortcuts set up on the Mac and my Nook like I've got on my PC. I want to say yes and no to that one, because my original plan is I was going to set up a bunch of keyboard shortcuts for my Mac, similar to how I have auto hotkeys set up on my main PC to do all sorts of various shortcuts. Well, I ended up finding a utility called Espanzo, which is a text expansion utility, but you can also use it to execute commands on the command line. And I have a lot of shortcuts set up for that on my Mac, so I can open up specific files and folders and things that I commonly access. So Espanzo is actually quite useful for that. So for that reason, I'm going to say that I did set up shortcuts on the Mac, but not in the way I originally thought. Espanzo is very useful though. I've also done the same thing in Linux with Espanzo. As far as the Intel NUC goes, I created a utility that has a whole bunch of different buttons that I commonly access, and I could just use this with my Steam controller. I also have a custom voice assistant called Mycroft that allows me to effectively do the same thing, except with custom voice commands. Hey Mycroft, open watch later. So I can access pretty much anything I need using voice commands on the Intel NUC. So I've got shortcuts set up pretty much the way I want to. Not the way I originally wanted to, but I would definitely count this as a success. Learn how to automate certain types of tasks in general. That one's kind of a mixed bag. I did not use Automate on Android, but I did use Tasker to create a shortcut that pulled up a certain dialog box so I could easily force stop an application and restart it. I consider that a form of automation, but not quite to the extent I was originally going to take it. I also listed Linux and Mac forms of automation on here, and I already kind of mentioned that I did this with Espanzo. So I'm going to say that I did kind of accomplish this goal. Maybe not quite to the extent I was originally going to, but hey, I can always set another goal for next year to take it further, right? My next goal was to get my A+ certification. I did not accomplish this. When I was just about ready to take my test, the new test standard came out and this 220, 10001, and 10002 expired, so I did not get this certification. I ended up getting the textbook for the next certification. This is already the 4th textbook I've gotten where I haven't managed to take the test to get my certification yet. But this year, I am really gonna get the certification for real this time. It will be mortifying if I end up failing this year. 6 or 7 years of failure is enough for me already. So I'm getting the certification this year, but I did not accomplish it last year. The goal where I was going to create a customized Fitbit clock face that allows me to do various things like notify me when somebody knocks on my door or the fire alarm goes off, or I get an email that matches specific filtered criteria. I did not accomplish that ultimate Fitbit clock face that does those things. I just haven't gotten to that project yet, so that was not successful. Get comfortable with object-oriented programming. I'm happy to say, but I did manage to accomplish this goal. So I did a bunch of Java programming and did various things with object-oriented programming and learned quite a lot of stuff that I never previously knew about it. I also learned about several software design principles like the adapter pattern and all sorts of stuff like that as well. So I learned about abstraction as well as object-oriented programming. And I need a lot of practice with it, but I feel like I know a lot more than I did last year. So I'm definitely going to count that as a go too. Out of pretty much everything that I've taught myself, object-oriented programming was by far one of the most difficult things for me to self-teach myself, unlike pretty much everything else. Do some form of machine learning on my own. I had some ideas planned, but I didn't actually really put anything into action. So no, I did not accomplish that New Year's goal. I did actually try something. So I talked about how I have this custom voice assistant called Minecraft, where I could basically program my own voice commands using Python programming. Well, you can program your own trigger phrases, and one way to do that is you either download a machine learning model from online or create your own. I tried one from online, but the voice recognition was absolutely terrible in my environment. So probably one of the best solutions if I wanted to use a custom trigger phrase like computer, Star Trek style, would be to train my own model that uses that word. So I did try that, but I decided it's not worth my time at this moment right now. So no, I did not accomplish that dream goal. Figure out virtualized audio streaming to my hearing aids if possible. I did not accomplish that dream goal right there. So the idea is I wanted to be able to connect my MacBook to my hearing aids via Bluetooth. Since I was promised it would work with my Resound hearing aids, it does not. So one of my ideas was to use QEMU to virtualize Android x86. And then I would pass through sound and Bluetooth so that I could hear through my hearing aids. Have the audio go through that somehow. I would pass the audio output as an input to this virtual machine, use some sort of app to broadcast it over Bluetooth back to my hearing aids. That's ultimately what I was going to try doing, but from my research, it doesn't really look like it's entirely possible. I haven't concluded that series yet, but I have one potential idea in mind that doesn't involve virtualization at all. I don't think it's going to work at all, but I haven't completed this project yet, so therefore this goal is not accomplished yet either. Complete my Raspberry Pi TV remote project. So this is the project where I was going to use a Raspberry Pi breadboard to make a makeshift TV remote. So I would have this breadboard hooked up to one Raspberry Pi, then I'd have another Raspberry Pi hooked up to a TV via HDMI. I'd use the HDMI CEC technology to transmit a signal to the TV to simulate TV remote presses, but the Raspberry Pi with the breadboard would transmit signals to this other Pi that's hooked up to the TV, and then I would be able to plug things in and unplug it to control the TV. I have a whole video series all about this for more information, but I literally finished this yesterday. So yes, I did accomplish that one. I mean, technically I didn't succeed with it. You'll see if you watch the conclusion video, but I did technically finish this project yesterday. So if I did this video before yesterday, I would not have been able to check that item off. Get Abacus Simulator figured out. So you might remember in last year's video, I mentioned how I have this Abacus simulator that I made in P5.js. And the idea is I want to do basic arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division using this Abacus simulator. And I wanted to be able to simulate everything step by step. The problem is I can't animate things step by step because when I add delays, it just does the whole answer at once instead of animating each individual step. I probably have more information somewhere, I'm not really sure. But I talked to a recent chatbot that came out called ChatGPT to get suggestions on that problem I was having with the animations, and it provided something that actually works. So everything does successfully animate step by step now, which is pretty cool. The solution was to asynchronously return a new promise with the delay that I wanted to set, and then the draw loop can keep running independently. I probably have more information about that somewhere, but I did end up solving the problem. So that was a success. Learn C++ and lower level languages. I did not succeed with that one. That's pretty much all there is to it. I just never got to it this year. Maybe next year. Learn web design. I didn't really get to that this year either. I did hardly anything with it at all. But I've got plans for that next year, which I'll go over in a little bit. So that was a failure too. Learn SQL and database queries. So of course SQL is kind of a database related language, and I kind of already know SQL as I have for a few years, but I don't really understand certain concepts like transactional databases and rolling back changes and that sort of thing. And that's something that I wanted to get more familiar with. I have not touched any of this in the last year like I was hoping to, but I did manage to install SQL Server in my own environment, so I accomplished that, but this goal is technically still a failure, so I'm not going to count that one. Learn Blackmagic Fusion. So Blackmagic Fusion is something that's built into the DaVinci Resolve video editor, and it allows you to do various things with like motion graphics, compositing, that sort of thing. Well, I'm happy to say that I got myself a lot more familiar with it. I understand how nodes work and pretty much how they connect to each other. I'm surprised that I actually made as much progress as I did considering the circumstances. So I am going to be able to mark that as a success. But I didn't quite get to any 3D related stuff. Maybe that'll happen later. But for the most part, I learned quite a lot about Fusion and I can do quite a lot of stuff in it now. Start PC Helpful Tips YouTube channel. I did not get to that. The channel is not officially ready to go yet, so that never ended up happening. I mean, I got some of the logistics worked out, but it hasn't officially started. I have tons of ideas written down though for that channel. I've been accumulating ideas and actually getting them on paper, but I haven't actually started the channel yet, so that was not successful. Start a video series combining my interests of computers and lucid dreaming. Nope, I did not do this one either. It's a very interesting idea, I think, but I'm not quite at a phase in my life where I'm ready to do that series yet, so that wasn't successful either. Learn how to network applications together. This one is kind of a mixed bag, to be perfectly honest, because I did start working on that concept and I did manage to get 2 copies of an application to link together via TCP/IP. I did try some other protocols, but most of them are expired. Well, expired may not be the best word, but they're out of date. And TCP/IP is one of the best ones that still works to this day. You could either run it locally or you could use port forwarding, and you should be able to do it outside of your own network. So I did get applications linked together, but as far as actually using it, I didn't quite succeed with that. And I honestly don't really care to take it any further at this point in time. So for now, I accomplished mostly what I initially wanted to, not quite as far as I wanted to, but I think I might still count it as a success. So this is kind of a tricky one. I might be cheating by saying it's successful, but I'm gonna count it as a success. I pretty much got as far as I want to. I don't really care to take it any further at this point. Learn 3D rendering, both for Blackmagic Fusion games and also 3D printing. I did not accomplish this at all. I never touched it in Blackmagic Fusion. To some extent, I did it with a game, but there's a really weird bug I'm dealing with right now and I haven't addressed it yet. And I haven't done anything with 3D printing yet, like I would have liked to do. So I'm gonna consider that a failure. Achieve a resting heart rate of 50 or below. I haven't really been focusing on that a whole lot in the last year, and I never managed to achieve that, so that was also a failure. Maybe next year. Edit the 20 plus videos that I haven't had a chance to edit yet, like putting my Intel Nook together, other tutorials, that sort of thing. I still have not gotten to any of those videos yet. These are videos I've recorded like almost 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and I still have not gotten a chance to edit them yet. And I'm falling behind with that sort of thing, so that was not accomplished either. Learn Vim. So of course Vim is a really pretty advanced text editor that's got all sorts of commands where you can move around like crazy. You could probably look it up online if you want to know about it, but I'm proud to say that I did end up managing to do that. So I'm actually using it with this right now in case you haven't been able to tell. So I can jump between my goals using Vim commands and basically highlight what I want pretty quickly. And yeah, so the way I'm actually highlighting this is Vim. And I've tried to use Vim in as many places as I possibly can. Of course, in the terminal itself, and on various IDEs and text editors. I've tried to use Vim in as many places as I possibly can. So yeah, very useful. I learned it from Ben Awad's tutorial on that and already became more proficient in Vim than Nano in probably about 2 hours. I thought Ben did a really good job teaching it. I also watched the Primogen, who's got interesting tutorials on Vim as well. He really knows how to move around on that thing. Become proficient in Excel and other prominent functions. I'm proud to say that I pretty much did that for the most part. I learned quite a lot of new functions in Excel, just how to use Excel in general, and also how to create data visualizations and things like that too. So I definitely learned quite a bit about Excel in the last year, which is exactly what I was going for. Play around with the music. So I was gonna mess around a little bit with music compositing and stuff like that, and GarageBand and things like that. I did not accomplish that goal, but I did mess with an app in VR called Paradiddle, which allows me to create my own virtual drum set, and I could either play songs that it comes with, or else I could just play it freestyle, which is pretty fun. Something I'm hoping to do soon is to map some of the songs that I already play into Paradiddle so I can see if I'm on rhythm and actually play it for once. But other than that, I didn't technically accomplish the goal to the extent that I wanted to, so I'm going to call that a failure too. Do welding project and learn the proper way to grind. I did not get to any of that, so end of story with that. That's also a failure. Learn how to solder. I never got to that either, so that also wasn't accomplished. I never got to solder that vibrator yet, but maybe this year we'll see. Make voice recording, going over common misconceptions I've made on lucid dreaming over the years. I did manage to do a voice recording this year on that, so that recording does now exist. I might share it in the description if I can. I'll have to wait and see, but I did an almost 4 hour long voice recording talking about misinformation that I've inadvertently spread on lucid dreaming over the years. So I've addressed as much as I could in that recording. I'm not sure if I quite addressed everything at this point, but that was recorded over a year ago, and I did manage to do that one. Get over my problems of stability with lucid dreaming. I'm gonna say that I definitely did manage to do that. Now, I wouldn't exactly say that it was 100% getting over it, but I did manage to improve that massively. And I guess I'll share some of the tricks that I personally found useful with that. So, I was in a lucid dream, which I recommend watching Lucid Dream Portal for information on lucid dreaming if you want to learn about that subject, particularly their 19-day course. Anyway, I struggled with keeping the dream stable while I was having a lucid dream. And one of the best ways that I've dealt with this personally is to just simply focus on the dream and what I'm doing. I know it kind of sounds too good to be true, but all I really have to do is experience the dream exactly how I want to experience it. If I feel like I'm gonna wake up or screw up in any way, I'm just simply not focusing on my dream experience enough. So I just fix that by focusing on it more. That's pretty much all there is to it. If I'm having those kind of problems, I'm just simply not focusing on the dream enough. So focusing on it more is probably one of the simplest ways to fix it. It took a little bit to get that down, but now it's pretty much second nature for the most part. And that's honestly one of the best ways you can possibly experience a dream in the first place. Let the dream do all the work so that you can just experience. What I also found is I somehow managed to get into the habit of using my imagination, which would often override the dream because you don't want to replace the dream with your imagination. And some things I found helpful for this is to just work with exactly what the dream is giving me, and then also focus on the present moment rather than what's coming up. Just trust that things will work out in one way or another. So work with what the dream's giving me and in the present moment as it's happening. That's also been extremely helpful too. Accomplished at least 5 of my dream goals. At first, I didn't really feel like I accomplished all that much over the year, but what's really weird about this subject is sometimes it could go for a really long period without any luck, and then sometimes it can also come in waves where you make a whole bunch of progress in one time period. So sometimes I could go months without real significant progress, and all of a sudden I can have a wave of progress, and I'd say that's kind of what happened for me over the last year. So I definitely accomplished at least 5 of my dream goals, some of which were part of the original plan, some of them that I kind of made up on the spot that I wanted to do given various scenarios. But regardless, I actually didn't do quite as bad as I initially thought when looking at the whole picture of what happened in the last year. Find my ideal go-to methods for lucid dreaming in general given various situations. So one of the best techniques for lucid dreaming is to actually have a well-rounded approach for all the different types of scenarios that can happen. So you want to be opportunistic and utilize a given scenario and do what's best for a given scenario and a set of variables. I'm actually pretty pleased with what I discovered in the last year regarding this. So as far as regained awareness dreams go, I'm still messing around with that a little bit, but I've had some interesting results so far. And then as far as maintained awareness dreams, there's a video that Daniel Love over at Lucid Dream Portal made where he talked about the types of lucid dreamers there are, like whether you're the kind that fall to sleep too quickly or you end up creating insomnia trying to maintain awareness, and pretty much everything in between. So the technique you do actually depends on which one of those modes you're in, more or less. I'd recommend watching the full video for more information on that. I think I found a pretty good set of strategies depending on which one of those modes I'm in, and it's been looking pretty promising so far. So I'm gonna say that I accomplished this. However, to me, there isn't necessarily such thing as accomplishing that kind of goal because you change a lot over time. Humans change over time, so the unique set of circumstances and variables will also change over time, and you need to be able to adapt to these new things. And I would say that for right now, I have it figured out pretty good, but it could change over time and I will have to adapt things accordingly. And I am still experimenting a little bit yet because I never figured out everything 100% or anything like that. This is basically a journey, not a destination. A marathon, not a sprint. But I would say that for this year, I definitely did my part regarding that. But I'm gonna have to continue doing stuff over time throughout my entire lucid dreaming practice. Speaking of lucid dreaming, tomorrow is International Lucid Dreaming Day, which is April 12th. So that's pretty exciting. Figure out exactly where I wanted to start after college. So I've been kind of debating exactly where I want to go in my career field because there's a lot of different options out there and it's kind of hard to choose specifically what I want to do. I knew that I wanted to do something within the IT field, but I had a hard time deciding exactly what I want to do within the IT field. Do I want to manage servers? Do I want to manage network architecture? Do I want to manage Linux servers? And there's a whole bunch of different areas. Do I want to do something with cybersecurity? So I've had kind of a hard time deciding exactly which area of IT I wanted to do. But Chris Titus on YouTube, he's actually been kind of a jack of all trades and he's experienced pretty much all of these different areas throughout his entire career. So I definitely answered that question for myself. What do I want to do? I think I'm gonna approach a little bit of everything and be sort of a jack of all trades while avoiding being a master of none. So that's probably what I'm gonna do for my career after college. I'm gonna start somewhere and then just constantly be willing to learn and better myself over time. That's actually a pretty satisfying solution to this problem that I've had for years. The answer was pretty much right in my face the entire time. If I asked someone what I should do, they would give me more and more ideas, and it made it even harder to decide. While doing a little bit of everything is probably going to be the answer for me. We'll have to wait and see. But I think the answer was literally in my face the whole time. But I'm pretty happy that I got that answer all figured out for the most part. How I'm going to go about doing this is a whole other question, though. We'll just see what happens. Figure out my strengths and weaknesses and see if I could tweak my weaknesses into strength. So of course, if you analyze your weaknesses, you can probably apply your knowledge of that and figure out how to turn it into a strength, or at least make it so it's not nearly as much of a hindrance as it previously was by looking at things in a different way. Well, I'd say I've done that a little bit in various areas, but just like with what I mentioned before, this is also a journey, not a destination. A marathon, not a sprint. So I did a little bit of this. I'm definitely going to check it off, but it's something that I'm going to be doing at all times because we can always improve in some area. Get my first higher level IT related job or experience for an internship. Well, I'm happy to say that I have an internship potentially lined up right now, and it's basically what you could consider a entry level into the IT field. I am genuinely stoked about this because it's pretty much exactly what I was looking for an entry level position and basically getting my feet wet entering the IT field. So I think I should be able to check this off depending on what I later find out, but I think I definitely accomplished this. Hopefully the internship will end up going well this year. But there's several things that I've wanted to learn over the years, and it sounds like I may get to learn quite a few of them within this internship that I'm going to do right now. So that's exciting. Now let's talk about my goals for this coming year. Now that we've gone over my goals for last year, you guys can count how many I've completed out of the total if you want to, but I'm going to move on to the next goals for now. So my first one is to try out different Linux environments, which is pretty much exactly what I wrote previously, but I'm going to take this a little bit further and do a little bit more exploration. So I'm going to explore Debian a little bit more, and maybe Fedora and Arch, and other distributions like Rocky and stuff like that. So I'm going to become familiar with different Linux environments and all the intricacies within them, and then also learn Linux server and really get the command line down at a server level, which I think would be very useful to know how to do. I kind of have this already, but I definitely want to take it a step further and get really good at all these commands and stuff. This year I also want to fully migrate to Linux. So I kind of started this process to some extent already. So on my main PC, I've actually made a video on this that I'll have an excerpt on this coming soon. But I've actually repartitioned my main computer so that I dual boost both Windows and Linux. And I haven't quite made the full migration yet, even though I have both of them installed. I want to try to make it so that most of the time I can get away with using Linux, and then during the times I need to, I could use Windows. I'm not going to fully switch to Linux 100%, of course, because I personally think that the best operating system is a combination of all of them and having the right tool for the right job. This is the reason why I pretty much use Windows, Mac, and Linux on a daily basis. Today, for example, I've used Windows more than I've used Mac, even though I'm using Mac for this right now. And I don't think I've done anything on Linux yet today, but pretty much every day I am using all three at some point. So I do pretty much use the right tool for the right job, and that to me is the ultimate operating system. I don't think there's any ultimate operating system other than a combination of all of them. And that's my personal opinion and experiences. I will continue to use QEMU in Linux like I already do, but I'll probably use VirtualBox or something else in situations that are more convenient, which is most likely going to be a Mac or Windows, not Linux. Again, right tool for the right job. So instead of creating a whole new Linux environment like I previously mentioned, I may tweak the current one that I already have if I feel the need to, rather than recreating an entire one from the get-go. I think I could learn a lot about the internal mechanics of how theming and all these different things work just by tweaking things a little bit and seeing what happens. So my Linux is actually Debian Titus, which I forgot to mention before. It is in this video excerpt, but that's what I'm going to be using at least for the time being. I'm very happy with it so far, by the way. I think it's pretty cool to use a window tiling manager like BSPWM combined with keyboard shortcuts and just quickly switching between windows. I personally like that workflow a lot. Of course, I'll continue to do home lab stuff and getting familiar with various IT technologies. So for example, this year I might mess around with Action 1 a little bit, which is like a centralized dashboard remote management software that not only has like console management, but also you can access various other things, pretty much all from a single dashboard. I'm going to explore various IT technologies like that one, Carbonite, and then pretty much anything you can imagine. Like I'm going to explore Windows Server more in depth and understand server roles, Active Directory, which I did learn in the last year, but I want to look at things a little more thoroughly. I'll probably do what I've already done as well, like ESXi, I'll explore that a bit further, Hyper-V, XCP-ng, TrueNAS, pfSense. I definitely want to explore pfSense a fair bit more. I'm also going to try to get more familiar with the cloud, like a VPS service, such as either AWS, Linode, SkySilk, something like that. And just get familiar with deploying servers in the cloud and then utilizing that in various ways, like running Docker microservices, just becoming familiar with Docker in general, and also setting up microservices, that sort of thing too. I'm also going to do Android automation a little bit more in depth too. I haven't really gone over or worked out the exact details for that yet, but I might see if I could create a widget that interfaces with an API, for example. That could be useful if that's even possible. We'll just see what ends up happening regarding that. So I've already talked about Mycroft a little bit, which is, I consider it a form of automation as well. I currently have Mycroft running right now, where I can control my Windows computer over SSH. So I'm going to expand my capabilities with that, which I'll have videos updating the status of that. As of right now, I can currently open files and folders like YouTube, watch later, pretty much anything like that. Searching stuff like Google or YouTube and having the search criteria automatically pop up entirely hands-free. Typing stuff, that's what I can do at the moment. But I'm gonna expand that a fair bit more over the next year. I'm just gonna keep adding tweaks over time and making it better as I see fit. Like moving the cursor entirely hands-free, improving the search ability so I can select search results completely hands-free. I mean, it pretty much goes on and on. I may end up doing a series on how I actually do all this too on YouTube. I don't know if I'm gonna do it next year, but I'm hoping to within the next couple years maybe. I'm gonna continue working on that as I see fit, but I got the most important stuff for me right now. I'm gonna also continue automating things in Linux like using SSHKD, which is how I use keyboard shortcuts in my window tiling manager. I'm going to get that more set up to suit my needs. And then same with Expanso, I'm going to set up more shortcuts there as well on Mac as well as my dual booted Linux environment. I'm also going to try to get more comfortable with PowerShell scripting as well. I've heard that it's kind of a painful language to work in, but the functionality is unbelievable, especially considering it's Windows. PowerShell can unlock a lot more functionality that you otherwise would not be able to do without the command line. So I'd like to get comfortable with PowerShell scripting so I could do all these different things and also do it without relying on stuff like ChatGPT. Although it will be helpful here and there too, so I will utilize it. But I want to try to get to a point where I can do a lot of stuff in PowerShell without its assistance. I may use it to help me with the learning process too. And then I can tailor things to my own needs and that sort of thing. I'm gonna also try to start using SDKs and APIs for things that I should have known years ago. What I mean by this is I've tried to automate certain tasks for various softwares using like AutoHotkey or something similar. But there's a lot of software that actually has an SDK or API available where you can interface with it directly. And that probably would be a better solution than a lot of things that I've done over the years, like with AutoHotkey or something. So the chance that using an SDK or API that may be available for a given software, I might be able to achieve much better results using that because it is quite powerful. OBS, for example, has an SDK, and that's how Stream Decks utilize it. You can do an unbelievable amount of stuff with that. All sorts of other software also have SDKs or APIs available for stuff that I previously never even knew was possible. When I realized all this, my mind was absolutely blown. Like what's possible with SDKs and APIs. I mean, seriously, you should look up and see what kind of stuff you could do with this. And then maybe use ChatGPT to help you accomplish that faster than you may otherwise accomplish it, assuming that it doesn't make mistakes to where it actually ends up prolonging that process of assisting you. But yeah, SDKs and APIs are ridiculously powerful, and almost every software probably has some form of this that I never previously even knew. I want to see what's possible with it and maybe try out various things using that. I think this is something you guys should definitely do as well if you're into this sort of thing. I'm also going to try getting my A+ certification for real this time. I'm not going to skimp out on it. I'm going to try to get it within the next few months. I took a practice test a few years ago, and I technically got a passing score as far as I'm concerned without even studying any of the book at that time. And I've studied a majority of the book. I just have to update my knowledge with the latest certification, and then also kind of stuff I don't know, then take the test. But regardless, I'm going to do it this year, or I will be mortified if I manage to fail again for like the 7th or 8th year now. I'm also going to try to get to that clock face project that I previously mentioned, where I create a custom Fitbit clock face that kind of looks like what I already have, but it's got enhanced functionality like setting a vibrating alarm for somebody knocks on my door, if the fire alarm goes off, if I get an email that has certain criteria, and I have it go off as needed. I think that would be really cool. That one's actually a huge maybe, but I am going to try to do it this year if I can manage to. I want to also try to do some form of machine learning on my own too. So for example, the trigger phrase with Minecraft using the word computer, I want to try to create my own model that's trained specifically to my environment so that I can minimize the false positives and the false negatives that I keep getting with this other model that I downloaded. So that's one form of machine learning. I have a couple other forms that I have planned, but I'm going to work out the details later. So I want to try to do a little bit of machine learning this year. That's the point. I'm also going to conclude that virtualized audio streaming thing to my hearing aids so I can stream to my hearing aids without a third-party accessory. ChatGPT said that I might need to use software like Soundflower to accomplish this, but I have a strong feeling that this is not going to work at all. Regardless, I'm going to try to conclude it, even if it's a positive or an anticlimactic conclusion. I'm also going to try to finish that abacus simulator. Now I got it to animate steps one at a time. I gotta make it so it does it fully correctly. While it does the steps, there are some times when I'll get answers wrong, or else it'll animate the steps just a little bit incorrectly, but still arrive at the correct answer. I'm going to finish that, then also add the other operations like subtraction, multiplication, division, and then also maybe converting between different base systems. This one is also a huge maybe. It may not end up happening this year at all, and I may end up pushing it off to a later year as well. We'll have to wait and see. Coming to the topic of low-level programming languages, I'm going to try to learn Rust and C++. So I keep hearing about Rust these days, how it's sort of like C++, but it's what's got the benefits of a lower-level programming language, but it's much higher level, and it even has other pros that C++ supposedly doesn't have too. And cons, I'm sure too. I don't really know. But I'm going to try to learn that as well as C++. As for which one I'm going to learn first, I don't really know yet. I'm going to look at the kind of stuff I could do with each one and I guess prioritize it based on what I want to do first with either one of them. I'm going to try to make lower level languages happen this year, otherwise I'll have to push it off again. I'm also going to do some more stuff with web design too, and I'm pretty sure that I am going to be able to do that this year. So I'm going to be doing some client and server side web development, try to get familiar with those concepts. I also have a public facing domain that I'm going to basically do some home lab related stuff with that too. I suppose I could tease one of the things that I want to do. So I'm going to try to set up an XCPNG host, but actually push it directly to my domain. I'm probably going to accomplish that with a VPS service. And then the way I can access my local machine would be I can establish an SSH tunnel. Then they can communicate with each other without having my computer forward facing the internet directly. And then from there, I'll run some sort of service and set up the DNS stuff with my domain. And then hopefully I should be able to create a no VNC connection to a virtual machine directly. That's kind of a complicated process, but I think it would be really cool to learn how to do a process like that. Also establishing VPN tunnel, that sort of thing too. So that's one example. I'm also going to do some other rudimentary examples with web design too. But that's one that I'm looking forward to doing relatively soon. Regarding SQL and database query stuff, I'm probably gonna do exactly what I said I never got a chance to do last year. So that'll be becoming familiar with like transactions, rollbacks, and all these other nitty gritty things with SQL. I'm also gonna try to get better at subqueries. That's like setting up queries but nesting them. There's also some intricate things that I don't quite get, like group by or sort by. I kind of get it to some extent, but I don't fully understand that, for example. So I want to get an understanding of general SQL syntax as well. And I imagine I'll be setting up some sort of SQL server as well, either on Microsoft Windows Server or else something else. I don't really know what yet. But the point is, I want to do stuff with SQL this year. Next, I want to learn some more advanced Blackmagic Fusion. So I already mentioned how I learned some of the basics about how nodes work and how they connect to each other, that sort of thing. But I also want to get into three-dimensional aspects of it too. Maybe even particle systems and how to do some more nitty-gritty stuff. So I could probably be considered either a beginner or intermediate Fusion user. I want to see if I can get myself to the advanced point. We'll have to wait and see how that goes though. Next, I want to actually start the PC Helpful Tips channel. So I don't know if I'm going to get too in depth with it this year and create a whole lot of videos with it, but I definitely want to get started with it and at least create sort of a minimum viable product and be able to say that I started the channel, as well as have a few videos on there too. So if you need a reminder of what that channel is going to be about, I want to be sharing quick tip related stuff on the computer. For example, I want to share how to enable host-based SSH authentication in like 1 minute. Because surprisingly, I can't find very good tutorials on how to do this online. It's really convoluted, but it is actually relatively straightforward. So I want to show that process, which would include disabling password-based authentication and stuff like that too. All in a minute because the steps are actually quite straightforward. It's just difficult to find it online for some reason. So that's an example of a tip. It's mostly going to be tips in like a minute to a few minutes max. I'm also going to do a second channel for more in-depth videos that actually deserve a longer video, and for those people who want more in-depth information and whatnot. That's the plan with the channel, so I'm going to at least get a minimum viable product going this year. As for the series that combines my interest between computers and lucid dreaming, I'm going to try to start it this year, but that one's a huge maybe and it might not end up happening at all. I'm not going to be disappointed if it doesn't quite yet, so we'll see what happens there. I'm going to also try to do some more 3D stuff, and that would include like Fusion, as I mentioned before. I'm going to do some game modeling related stuff and try to get more familiar with that, and then also some 3D printing. I want to try to model my own 3D prints and see if I can get those created. I'll let you know about that if I end up making progress on any of that. I want to try to see if I can get a resting heart rate of 50 and see if I can get my Fitbit to report that, but we'll have to wait and see when it comes to that as well. I want to shoot for it. I'll shoot for the moon, but even if I miss, I'll get close and land on a star. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to try to edit some of these videos that I haven't got a chance to edit yet, as I mentioned before. Like 3 or 4 years behind on some of this editing. I want to at least try to see if I can get some of it, if not all of it. I don't suspect I'm going to fully succeed with that one, but we'll see. I'm going to also try to improve my Vim capabilities as well. So obviously I do a little bit of Vim right now, but there are things that I could do a lot better. So there's certain keyboard shortcuts that I could be pressing where I'm doing it in a slightly more long-winded way than I should be doing it in. So I'm going to try to improve my skills with basic stuff that the Primeagen covers. So for example, previously I didn't actually know how to real quickly replace a word with another word, where I yank and paste a word. But I recently learned that, for example, let's say I want to replace that word Vim right there with music right here. Well, I now know that I can yank that entire word and then go like that. I didn't previously know that I could use visual mode to paste old content. What I would have done back then was something that's not quite so simple and straightforward. I would have probably done something like this. Gone to the beginning of that word, pasted it, and then got rid of the rest of that word. That can be kind of convoluted if there's a whole bunch of stuff in quotes, for example, or parentheses, and I want to do the entire thing. So let's just say I have this in parentheses right there. That's also something I improved on. What you just saw me do was something that I couldn't do quite as efficiently months ago. So if I wanted to replace the stuff in parentheses with just music alone, I could yank that and then, oops. See, I didn't quite do that right because it is literally something I want to improve on. I want to be able to do it correctly without glitching out like that. So I just highlight everything in parentheses. See, what I would have done before that was paste the word music, this word music right here, and then got rid of pretty much everything else. Been like DT right parenthesis. That's not very efficient. What I could do instead is go like this. That's something I learned within the last few months. That's an example of an improvement to Vim. So I talked about improvements with Vim. Well, I just gave an example of a recent improvement that I mostly managed to achieve at this point. But there's a lot of rudimentary stuff like that that I could still improve on massively. So I'm going to continue improving my skills with Vim to reduce the mental overhead and stuff like that. The Primogen has tons of videos talking about ways to do this. There's the most obscure ways you can possibly imagine. That's what I'm going to do. So regarding the playing around with music, I think what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to try to see if I can get some composing down, maybe compose some drum rhythms or something. Keep it real basic for now until I go a bit further and do some more complex songs and stuff like that if I ever get that far. And then also doing that paradiddle stuff that I mentioned before. I'm going to try to get some MIDI files mapped to paradiddle so I can play some MIDI files within the app. This is a VR thing. I'm going to try to get that set up too. So I'm going to do some more stuff with music. I'm going to also try to learn some proper grinding techniques because you probably know that angles matter on your workpiece, and if you do it at the wrong angle, you could be spending all day getting absolutely nowhere. I don't quite know all these intricacies yet, so I'm gonna try to have my father teach me these things this year, hopefully. We'll see if that ends up happening too. You probably noticed that it no longer says this welding project. Well, the one I had in mind, I looked into it a little bit further and it looks like something that might not actually be possible like I was hoping it would, so it's probably going to be a little while before that ends up happening. Could even be a decade from now, I don't really know. But for now, I'm going to focus on the grinding aspect. That is something I want to get down. My dad's talked to me about all these tricks that exist, and I've never really quite understood them, and it would be nice to have an understanding of them for a change. I'm also going to try to learn how to solder and do that soldering project and get that vibrator back together that I mentioned in last year's video. I have a vibrator cord that tore up and I want to try to solder that back together. Even if I had to have an ugly hot glue mess on the outside ultimately. But it would be kind of nice to have a spare vibrator using this. As I mentioned before, I'm also going to continue improving my lucid dreaming practices and basically constantly improve my strategies where I adapt to my current situation and also make improvements to what I already do as it is. It's a journey, not a destination, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to continue with all this like I probably will every year indefinitely. With the next internship I have, I'm going to try to learn from that experience as much as I can and try to grow as a person from that. I'm also going to continue that process of turning weaknesses into strengths. That's something that can probably be improved throughout one's life. So I'm going to continue to do that as well. That is it. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to let me know. I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, I believe that is it. So thanks for watching and have a good one. And before I peace out, believe it or not, I have yet another file that ended up being exactly 69 lines long. So this list that I went through just happens to be 69 lines long. And that's just great. Otherwise, peace.